The views and opinions expressed in the following paid pre-recorded program are those of the host, callers, and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the station, its management, or its owners.
Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC. Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC. Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Capital Advisory Group, Inc. is not affiliated with Kestra IS or Kestra AS. Neither Kestra IS nor Kestra AS provide legal or tax advice and are not certified public accounting firms.
You work hard for your money. For the next hour, you're going to learn how to keep what's yours. Capital Advisory Group presents Keep What's Yours. Here are Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Hello and welcome to Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. I am Josh Gilbert, sitting here with Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. Hello, Jeff.
Hello. Happy Saturday.
Got a lot of stuff to talk about. I've got a news story that I was reading one of the big papers the other day, and I stumbled across this news story, and I pointed.
That's
you ever
right.
seen that meme of Leo DiCaprio from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? And he's pointing at the TV.
Yeah.
That was me to this. Hey, we talk about that all the time.
Yep.
We've been talking about it for the last 6 months, it
Exactly.
seems. And it's about the IRS penalty that has gone way up with interest rates and how people are getting caught with their pants down. Or
Yes.
I guess, with their pockets.
Pockets open.
Yeah, pockets open. They got caught. So we'll talk about a story I saw that has been echoing what we've been saying on this show. We'll get into self-employed tax credits. That was something that got you a lot of phone calls.
Yes.
From
a
last
lot of
week.
people, and again, we'll explain that in detail. A lot of people are missing it, and they don't realize that they're entitled to that credit.
And part-time seasonal work dovetailing into how do you even fill out a W-4 anyway? I actually just hit a milestone here at the Big 550. No fanfare or anything, but I've been here for 15 years.
Dun, 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 dun.
Which
Congratulations.
Thank you. Which means that I haven't filled out a W-4
In 15 years.
in 15 years. And even back then, I didn't know what I was doing anyway. So we'll get into that. But first and foremost, I want to tell you a story, Jeff Zufall. Listening to the McGraw show, McGraw Millhaven. And you travel a lot. You go to conventions.
Oh, yeah.
You go to training. You go
Yes.
to, and as a tax strategist and a wealth advisor, you do continuing education.
Tons of it. Tons and tons of it.
Because the tax code changes
Oh, yeah.
all the time.
All the time.
And
Securities laws are changing. You need to, even if you got to do the goofy, 50-minute video to make sure that you're compliant,
right.
you still have to do it. So.
But sometimes you go to conventions. You go up to Chicago quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
You go to Vegas from time to time. You probably get on a lot of planes.
A bunch.
So McGraw Millhaven in the morning, God love him. He was talking about family boarding.
Yes.
And how he didn't believe in it. And how he thought it was a scam and people are jumping the line.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying that he paid extra
Yes.
to get pre-boarding with Southwest Airlines. And he mentioned that he's traveling with his 4-year-old daughter.
He should be in that line and get pre-board.
I rolled into the station. He had just gotten off the air, waiting for him to come out. And as soon as he walked out, I shouted at him. I said, family boarding is literally made for you.
Exactly.
So that when you're traveling with your daughter,
You can
who
get
is
her,
4 years old,
get her on the plane, get her situated, and sit down.
and you can make sure that you sit together.
Exactly.
And he literally said, oh, I didn't think about sitting together. That's what it's for.
That's completely what it's for.
That's what it's made for.
Yes.
I bring it back to this. When it comes to taxes,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us don't like, I hate tax breaks. And, everybody should pay their fair share, or there should be a whatever we say about taxes.
Yes.
And I told you one time I walked into a Party City, and the lady was lamenting the child tax credit boost
Yes.
that we got during COVID. And she says, I'm not going to cash that check. They sent them to our houses. I think I got mine direct deposited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is great.
If you were on the list for direct deposit, it automatically direct deposits.
We might have a long-standing grudge against the IRS, or in McGraw's case, against early boarding for
Yes.
families. But now that he is a family, he still doesn't take advantage of it. We might have our own grudges with the IRS and with the tax code. But the fact of the matter is, if it's out there for us to take advantage of it,
Take advantage of it.
why wouldn't we?
Yes.
This lady that's getting a free $2,000 check from the government, if she doesn't cash it,
That's the IRS doesn't care.
they don't care.
Yeah. Maybe in 6 months they'll send her a new one or send her a letter and say, hey, you haven't cashed
Why
this
didn't you
check.
cash that check?
Yeah.
But they don't care.
Yeah, it's part of it. Take it. I mean, again, love him or hate him, but Trump in the debate with Hillary, and his response was
Famously said,
yes. I mean, basically, hey, the tax laws are out there. I use it to my advantage.
why wouldn't I'd be an
Exactly.
idiot not to take
Exactly.
advantage of the tax code the way
Yep.
it's written?
Yeah.
And if they want to do a deep dive into his taxes, which they have,
They have.
if they found nefarious stuff, which they kind of have, at least with his company,
Yeah.
they'll go after him. But Donald Trump's not sitting in a prison cell right now because
No.
he used the tax code
To his
the
advantage.
way it was written
Yes.
to his advantage. And if you
Yep.
say, well, I don't think the tax code should be giving wealthy people breaks like this. Well, I mean, it is what it is.
Exactly. And,
But-
and again, at the end of the day, if you don't use it to your advantage, you're leaving money on the table.
In the meantime, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And for most of us out there, we don't fall into the same tax bracket that Donald Trump does.
Oh, no, not even close.
Or any of the billionaires out there.
Yeah.
We fall into tax brackets where normal people live.
Yes.
But there's stuff on the books
Yes.
that we could take advantage of.
Tons of stuff.
And if you're not taking advantage of it, you're boarding the plane last.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah. Sitting in the very back,
Yes.
right next to the engine.
Yes, right. You're in the row that gets
Yes.
you get hit in the head every time someone goes to the bathroom. So that is, I wanted to bring that up because it's just like taxes. You might have thought of the IRS one way in your 20s,
Exactly.
but now that you're in your 30s with a house, with a baby,
And you're like, hey, I'll take advantage of this.
hey, there's some stuff out there for me to take advantage of.
Exactly.
Now, the beauty of the IRS and our lovely representatives in Congress, they'll make changes to the tax code, and they won't tell us about it.
Nobody says a word. You're on your own to figure it out. And
I-
that's where that CE comes into play, where you're constantly reading, constantly, I say taking tests, if you want to call it that, but you're constantly under the gun to make sure that you're up with the latest and greatest. And there's I'd say probably every 6 months, 3 months, there's changes to the tax adjustment. I shouldn't say changes. It's not a major change. It is a small adjustment, and you just got to stay up with it all.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're not taking advantage of it, you're leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
You're paying the IRS.
I mean, the Secure Act alone, which would have been, I guess that would have been November of last year when it was passed, there were 86 different retirement tax law changes, just in that one bill. So,
and if there's 86 changes, chances are, if I'm retired,
about 20 of them apply to you.
there you go. So let that just be the impetus to call Jeff right then and there. 636-394-5524. Are you retired? And have you been notified of the 86 changes to the tax code?
No.
No, you haven't. I always like to say, well, Congress forgot to tell us.
Yeah,
about
they
it.
forgot. They forgot to
didn't-
send that email out.
They didn't forget. It's not part of the process.
Exactly.
So what you need is someone on your side, a tax advisor, senior tax strategist like Jeff, who keeps up with the laws and the changes, and to go in, I like to say twice a year.
Yeah.
You probably see people.
6 months. Well, it depends. It depends upon your situation. The most typical is every 6 months, kind of a quick review. And there may be a review on the backside that we don't even explain to people, but we just review it. We go, everything's good. We'll leave it as is and go from there. But typically 6 months. We do have clients that it's a bi-monthly adjustments, tweaks, just because they got a lot of different stuff going on there.
Sure. And I'll say this, I repeat this all the time as well. If you don't do anything and you see Jeff once a year and something has changed in the tax code, well, you'll be able to fix it in April.
Exactly.
But what if it's July?
Exactly.
You could take advantage for the next 5 months or so of that tax code change.
Yes.
Otherwise, again, you're paying the government more than you have to.
Exactly. And in 25, depending upon how this election goes, there may be massive tax changes. What I hear is everybody's like, well, taxes are going up and they're going to go up even more. Technically, yes, they probably will. But it's how you're taxed is the question of the day. And we don't know until we get to, because Trump's tax laws sunset 2025. So whoever wins this election, not by choice, but by design, will have to go in and revamp tax laws.
And they could say, let's keep them the way they
Exactly.
are. Or they could say, let's throw it out.
Yeah, and we're
all
going to
over.
revamp it completely and do massive tax law changes. The biggest one was in 1986 when they did the tax law change. It was huge. So again, Trump's tax law change in 19 or 18, I guess, effective 19, was the second biggest tax law change out there since 86. So that tells you how often they revamp the tax laws.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens in 25.
So keep that in mind and keep Jeff's number handy. You should call him right now, 636-394-5524. Get an appointment on the calendar. Go to the appointment. Bring a couple of W-2s. Bring a couple of years' tax returns.
Yeah, 2 years tax returns, brokerage statements, anything that you think.
Paycheck stub.
Yeah, paycheck stubs, 401k statements, because we'll be able to extract, hey, how much are you putting into your 401k? Should you increase it? We see a lot of people, again, some people we know that will do all their contributions in their 401k to a Roth, which is after tax, saves them no taxes. And we get into this debate of, pre-tax versus after-tax. A Roth is better than pre-tax, but it totally depends upon your situation where you're sitting today. And so mathematically we can show you that maybe it's a 50-50. Maybe it's all pre-tax. Just depends.
Yep, and it's an ongoing thing, and if you don't keep tabs on it, you will probably end up paying more in taxes.
Yes.
And you'll probably find out that you didn't save as much as you could have.
Exactly. That's the big kicker.
All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, amended returns, that's big. There's an IRS penalty sitting out there that we might not be aware of. Self-employed tax credits, that got a lot of phone calls from the last show. We'll touch on that again. And how do you really fill out that W-4? Does anyone know?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows, but we'll dig into it. It is Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. Here's the number again, 636-394-5524, or visit them online at CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Back to the show, back to Keep What's Yours. And, Jeff, let's talk amended returns here because,
Yes.
we file for an extension or we see a change that came across after we already filed our taxes.
Yes.
We have a little bit of time. It's my understanding October.
Well, so an extension is where you just file an extension, and it's not to pay tax. A lot of people think that they can cheat and pay taxes, and I go, I'll file an extension, I'll wait until October, and then I'll file my return and pay all my tax. That'll tie back into what we're going to talk about on underpayment penalties.
Sure.
But this is more an amended return. I just did last week probably 5 that are just goofy little, there's a W-2 or a 1099 that was missed for $3,000. Or somebody got a K-1. They're like, hey, I've never gotten one of these ever before. So you have to go amend the return. On the federal side, used to be back in the day when you amended a return, you had to amend it, had to be physically signed, and had to be mailed in. The IRS now allows or has allowed for the last couple of years for us to e-file a amended return. So it's short, sweet, and simple. And if you owe money, you write them a check. If they owe you money, they'll deposit it in your bank account just like a regular tax return. But the state of Missouri, literally you have to do it by paper form, sign it, and mail it in to them. And they are efficient. Within 10 days, 15 days or so, they get back with you.
And if I get a K-1 in the mail on May 3rd,
yes,
I'm like, oh, this could be a problem. That's kind of an indication. But how would I ever know
technically you wouldn't
that I need to amend my return?
So literally, it's only if you get like a corrected 1099 or a K-1 possibly. or it turns out that you get a 1099 because you did a little side work and somebody forgot to send you a 1099. Those kind of things that take place are the one from 2 weeks ago was somebody who's self-employed realized, hey, I found more mileage. Literally just he had it on the app. He didn't read the app right when he told us what the miles was. He had 750 more miles that we could add to it. So we went back and added those miles and got a deduction. So it's a matter of just doing most people are like, oh, they'll never catch it. Yes, they will. It'll take them 18 months. Used to take them about 12 months, a little bit over a year. They'd catch it and say, hey, we got notice that somebody else reported X and you only reported this. We've seen a lot where they're corrected 1099s from brokerage statements. And it might be $50, subtle change, nothing major. They move a dividend to a capital gain or vice versa. But you need to report that stuff.
Let me ask you this. I always say on this show that the IRS is fair. If you owe them money, they want it. If they owe you, they'll pay you.
Exactly.
But when it comes to amended returns, if a K-1 comes in late or if something goofy is going on, will the IRS reach out if they owe you money?
No. And what they'll send, it's not a bill that they send you. It is a change notice. And what they're saying is, hey, it's a proposed change. And if you read the letter, it'll say, we received information that says otherwise.
Right.
So you said X on your return. We're seeing this. What's going on?
So we always talk about this as well. You get a K-1, you get a W-2, you get a 1099. A copy comes to us and a copy goes to the IRS.
Yes.
Now, will they tell you, hey, we have this K-1 sitting here that you didn't declare, or will they be more cagey and just say your return is incomplete?
No, they'll tell you. If second page of the notice that they send you, they'll say, we received, they won't tell you exactly what it is, but it'll give you the company name.
And then
tax,
we can,
and they'll show you the
be
difference.
able to trace it back.
You reported 0. They reported X.
They reported that they actually paid you $5,000.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. So that's
whoops.
where you want to make sure. And the other ones that we see are corrected W-2s. We just saw a couple come through where the HSA contributions were miscalculated somehow. So literally it was, originally like $480 or $500. It really should have been $480. So you just got to go in there and adjust the return.
So amended returns are both maybe you didn't declare something that
Exactly.
they got a copy of, or fat finger number mistakes.
Yeah, could be where you look at it. I fess up. In one case, I forgot a child on a tax return. I fess up. I did it.
Jeff, you were at her wedding.
Yeah, and it was like, oops. No, I sat and talked with the client, and the child was sitting right there, and kind of forgot. Like, oops. But we went back, corrected it. So it's amended return, add the child. They get an extra $2,000. Looks beautiful on paper, but it was just embarrassing that I kind of forgot that.
We named you her godfather.
Yeah.
How far back can we go?
Typically 3 years is
3
what you
years.
can do.
Okay.
Yeah. So as if you find something or you realize that there's a change, typically these are business owners that will go back 3 years. If you owe a tax and you're a business owner, it's unlimited.
The IRS can go back unlimited.
Exactly.
We generally can only go back 3 years.
3 years. Yeah. Yeah. And typically, after 3 years, they haven't kicked anything up. Leave it alone.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, let's talk amended returns. Those are coming in now. You're doing those this summer. You're seeing those roll over. Anything that we should say about them before we move on to this penalty? Is there something we should look for? Is there
no. It's just anything
of?
that shows up. Anything that you go, ooh, I don't think that was in my. So what we do is when we receive all the data for a tax return, we scan it to a system. That way we have all the documentation that we used for that tax return. If we amend a return and add a document, it's added into that package at the very end. So we can keep tabs kind of on big picture, like, hey, where'd that go? And again, sometimes like a 1099 is overlooked, or it was mailed to the wrong, it never got delivered to your house. You didn't pay attention to it. Typically, we can catch those if we're doing the returns, because if we see a change from the previous year to, so say in 2023, You had a 1099 from XYZ company. When we do 24s, we're going to be like, hey, what happened? Where'd that go?
Right.
And then people are like, oh, yeah, I missed it, or it never showed up. I got to go find it. Or they won't send it to you because it's online. You physically have to go print it. Student loan is notorious. They never mail anything out. You physically have to go get it online and
Sure.
pull it down.
And this is helpful to go visit Jeff because he can say, do you have student loans?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I guess I do.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I never would have. Well, I guess I'll go through my email and see where it's at.
And go find,
You can remind people before we even get to the amended return part to include all this stuff. And like I said, when things happen, we get paid or we get 1099s, the government gets a copy of that.
Always.
But they don't know about my student loans. They don't know about, we've got a kid in college. They don't know about my son in daycare.
Yeah.
It's up to me
to say, here's a deduction I can take, and here's how I'm taking it.
If I forgot to tell you about that, which would be insane because we talk all the time, once a week at least, for the radio show. But if I forgot to tell you about something and I'm like, I think I can get some money back on this. I don't know how we forgot about our son. Now I'm forgetting kids.
Yeah.
Can I come to you and say, hey, I think we could actually get some money back, and we forgot to mention this.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we plug it in and see where it's at and take off and go.
Now, I forget what newspaper I was reading, and it was one of the big ones, but they were talking about a surging IRS penalty that is costing Americans billions of dollars. And I pointed at my computer screen, and I said, we've been talking about this for months now.
Yes.
If you don't pay your taxes, pay them, or at least even, the people, the self-employed people who don't pay quarterly.
So look at this way. The easiest way to play this game is if you pay in 95% of your previous year's tax liability, you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But what we see is sometimes where people make more money. But they don't have the right withholding. And what takes place is if you owe the IRS or the state more than $1,000, then these underpayment penalties apply. And so, again, not that you want to overpay your taxes consistently, but you want to make sure that you're on somewhat of a target. Because say that you owe $5,000 in tax. The first $1,000 is kind of the freebie, but the $4,000 excess, the calculation is actually 8% on a calendar quarter.
Mm.
So in the past, we used to play the game to say, hey, market's doing really good. You could, you're going to pay a 2% or 1.5 quarterly fee. Pay the taxes, when you do the return, and yes, you will be hit with an underpayment penalty, but you can make more money elsewhere.
So if I owe $10,000 to the government in the past, a 2%
wasn't that big of a deal
penalty,
yeah.
I could put it in the market for the next 9 months and make 5%.
Exactly.
And then I'll pay the government their 2%.
And you're gonna pay the penalty, which is a tax on top of a tax, but you can still you could make money with your money.
Yeah. My money's making more for me than this penalty is.
Today you cannot.
Why is it at 8% now?
Because the Federal Reserve has raised rates over the last 2 years, and they're now to the standpoint like basically I think we're running at what 7.25. So as rates go up, the feds will then increase their penalty rate, if you want to call it, as it goes forward.
So this is a penalty for not paying your taxes on time.
Yeah.
And again,
and are paying in not enough taxes to be paid
underpaying.
in.
Yeah. And again, if you do file an extension, you get it in by October, it doesn't mean you don't have to pay. You're still supposed to pay by April 15th.
Exactly. So even if you file an extension and you owe $3,000, you're supposed to come up with the $3,000 when you file the extension. And then the extension is strictly for the paperwork side of it to get into the IRS. And they still want you to guess at what your tax might be, and usually you overshoot just a little bit to be safe. But if you owe $5,000 and then you wait till October, what's going to take place is from April 15th, come in forward, there's this 8% a calendar quarter is what they impose.
And if you visit Jeff Zufall and you let Jeff do your taxes like we have, 636-394-5524, give him a call. You don't have to worry about this because Jeff will remind you, make sure and everything. But when you first started talking about this penalty, skyrocketing up, and people are getting caught with their pockets out.
Yes.
I thought it was the IRS, the federal government, saying these people have been gaming the system for too long by not paying us, making the money work for the next 9 months, and then they finally pay us back, but they're 3% ahead. I thought it was to say, all right, we're sick of people gaming the system. We're going to jack up the penalty percentage.
It's been out there forever. It just wasn't a threat that it is today, I guess.
But they didn't raise it to try to catch us and stop us. It went up because interest rates
rates in general went up, so they followed suit.
If interest rates go back down to 2.75, which they probably never will.
It'll be beautiful if they did. I don't count on it, though.
Historic low interest rates.
Yes.
And thankfully, I bought my house in that period.
Exactly.
But if they go back down, the penalty
will come back down with it.
Come back down.
So it's just kind of going hand in hand with the inflation / interest rates at the time.
So if you've been doing this for years, and is it something that we say it's kind of shady, or is it? I mean,
no, it's not really shady. It's just most people will say, "Hey, I pay my taxes when they're due." Well, the problem is the IRS wants to be paid when you get paid on a consistent basis. They don't want you to wait until April 20th and then write a check to them and then say, "Hey, I paid my tax on time." Technically, you didn't because you owed tax as you earned it throughout the previous year. So it's this really applies to self-employed people, where the self-employment tax sneaks up and they owe a bunch of tax, and then they're like, man, I owe, $10,000, and then you have the underpayment penalties on top of that. So it's a tax on top of a tax, and it's to get you to maybe monthly, maybe at least calendar quarter, pay your estimated payments as you go.
Yeah. So keep that in mind. Something that hit the national newspapers, but something we've been chatting about here for at least 6 months.
Because October of 22 is when they finally jumped up to the rates that they're at today, and they've held so far. I guess it would have been October 23. They jumped up to the rates on where they're at.
And if you've been playing this game when the interest rates were low, you probably got a shock to the system.
We did calculations, and we're like, yeah, you make more. You're going to pay a little bit of a penalty, so you make more in the open market. Go do your thing. People were aware of it. They knew it was going to be there. But today it's big enough that it will open your eyes a little bit. And so when we do I call it our letter, that basically says, hey, here's your taxable income, blah, 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 you owe tax, estimated payments, whatever, it will actually pull out that penalty and say, hey, you paid $800 to play the game. So you might have well paid your tax.
Making 3%, you're paying 5% extra.
Exactly.
Woof. Woof. Yeah,
it's a big number today. Yeah. So
that's called losing the game.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's go to commercial break. 636-394-5524. That's the phone number that you can reach Jeff Zufall at Capital Advisory Group. He is the senior tax strategist and wealth advisor. And full disclosure, he is my senior tax strategist and wealth advisor. CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com is the website, and we'll be back right after this.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Back on the show, back to the Big 550, back to Keep What's Yours, the only show in town that is hosted by Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall that tells you how to keep more of what's yours.
That's right.
I think I can say that with absolute certainty.
I haven't seen many.
Yeah, we're not hosting other shows.
No.
But the idea is to make sure that you're following the tax code, number one, but utilizing the tax code, number two, to your benefit. And I always say this, it is about information, and that's what we provide.
It's all information.
So you can leave this show and say, oh, I am now capable with this information to save a little bit more, keep a little bit more of my money on my tax return. And then they go home and they realize, how do I do that?
Yeah, you're like, what?
I know there's something out there for me to take advantage of, but I don't know how. The first thing to implement it into my plan, and that's where Jeff comes in as well, because he can tell you that it exists, and then he can show you how you can get it done. And like every paycheck that my wife has, it's something's coming out for my son's daycare. How did we get that implemented? Jeff took care of it. So I wouldn't even know the first thing. It's like, I go home and say, hey, honey, there's these tax credits and this. And then she said, great. Well, how do we take advantage of it? I don't know. I don't know.
Call Jeff.
I guess I'll call Jeff, 636-394-5524. I would mostly just probably text Jeff.
Yeah.
And just say, hey, how do we do this?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You know that it exists. Well, how do I actually take advantage of it? Well, you call Jeff. Self-employed tax credits, people called Jeff last week about this in multiple phone calls. They heard us talking about the self-employed tax credits, and then they called you and say, well, now, wait a minute. What is this again?
How do I do it?
That's the yin to the yang. You found out from the show. Then you call Jeff and you say, how do I do it? So what is the SETC, self-employed tax credit?
So this is if you were a sole proprietor. It extends to sole proprietors, basically managing a business, 1099 subcontractors, single-member LLCs, anybody that files a Schedule C on their tax return. This is not the ERTC. It's a spin of it, but it's not the ERTC. And basically what it's saying is the maximum amount you can get is $5,110 if for a taxpayer's credit, and $2,000 if you were caring for a family member or a child that got COVID. And you go, wait a minute. But again, if you were a sole proprietor in the past, you never got a credit. You didn't make the ERTC credit. You might have technically made the PPP loan stuff, but borderline. But this is actually out there. It's a refundable credit, which means it extends to your overall tax liability, and you're going to receive in cash the excess. So say that you get a refund. Most tax credits will be non-refundable, which means you have to have a tax liability at the end of the year, and then you get that credit. And if you don't, then it carries forward to the next year.
And that's kind of the thing that I never understood. Sometimes they're called tax credits. Sometimes they're called this. Sometimes they're that. When it comes to the electric cars,
yes.
If they're offering $7,500. Well, if I buy an electric car and it's only $6,000. They're only going to give me the credit up to, what I paid for it.
It's a $7,500 credit to fill the form out.
Oh,
so
really?
You'll get $7,500, and you can either use it for the down payment on the vehicle, or they'll send you a refund in the mail.
But some tax credits are like, you
Most
only had a liability of $5,000, but
Exactly.
it goes up to $7,000. They're not going to give us. They're only going to give us what our liability was.
One of them is like some of these food pantry credits and stuff like that you get on the state side. They give you a perk. So if you give them $100, they give you an extra $50 or an extra $70 on top of what you gave as a state credit. But those are subject to, you have to have a state tax liability at the end of the year.
Right.
If you do not, they just carry forward to the next year, and hopefully you have a tax liability that it could go against.
But some of these, like the self-employed tax credit, it's a check.
It's a check. So literally,
$5,000.
yeah. So if you had a $1,000 tax liability, you had a $5,000 credit coming to you. $1,000 going to take care of the tax, and then $4,000 would be a refund coming back to you.
How about that? So
yeah. So this one,
how does this work again? If I'm self-employed,
yes,
I am a sole proprietor.
Yes,
I am the reason that money is coming in.
Exactly.
But I got laid up with COVID for 3 weeks.
Yep. So you are entitled to a chunk of this refund that's sitting out there.
I could not work for 3 weeks because I had COVID, and
or maybe you didn't have COVID, but you took care of somebody that had COVID.
I had to put work on the hold.
Yep. And take care of them.
Because my wife had COVID, and I had to take care of her. I can
still submit the paperwork and get the credit. And
How about
this is going until March of 25, and then this thing shuts down in March of 25.
When did they come up with this? Just recently?
No, this one's been hiding out there in the wings for a while. We didn't even see it until probably about 3-4 months ago. So it's something to really, if you were the Uber driver and you couldn't drive because you got COVID and the world came to a screeching halt in 20 and 21, you're entitled to this credit.
So if I was unemployed, during the pandemic, they gave the unemployment bonus,
Mhm.
and for better or for worse, a lot of people were like, "Well, why would I go back to work? You
Yeah.
know, I'm getting the unemployment plus
I heard
bonus.
that a couple of times, and I was scratching my head going, 'cause you have to?
Do you have to go to work?" So if I'm unemployed, they gave me a bonus because they were like, "It's the pandemic. We're gonna help
Mhm.
people out." If I had a job, but I couldn't work for a week or two, it's like even if like in my life, I'm self-employed, I go down with an illness, I can't file for unemployment for that week. If I'm an Uber, if I don't work, I don't make money.
Yeah, that's basically what they're saying.
But they say if you had COVID, retroactive to
Yes.
2020, if you had COVID and you couldn't work for 2 weeks, you can submit and you got some money coming back.
It's some
to you.
documentation, but it will take a little bit, but you will get a check back from them.
How about that?
Yeah.
And I
So-
know, I had it like 4 times.
Yeah.
You know, I had it very recently. It's still out there.
Last week, thanks.
No, it wasn't.
No.
Within the last calendar year.
Yeah.
So it's still out there. But I'm not a self-employed. I'm a sole proprietor.
Yeah, so it won't apply to you.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if you got it and you were an Uber driver or you were
Oh, yeah.
responsible for work or you didn't get paid,
Yeah,
you can
and there was
submit
no
this.
other programs out there for you other than unemployment scenario back in the day.
I bet a lot of people
There's a bunch
missed
of
out
people.
on some money
They did. A lot
because
of
they
people
couldn't
did.
work because
Yeah.
a lot of people got COVID.
Yeah, tons.
Yeah.
So this is a credit that's out there that a lot of people don't. Everybody knows about, the PPP program and the ERTC. ERTC became Fraud Central.
Yeah.
They literally shut it down because
I'm
they couldn't
glad
figure
they
it out.
did. That was a
They
free
should
for
have,
all.
because there were people that called us. We said, you don't qualify. Here's the technicalities. And then 3 months later, they go, hey, I got a check for $55,000. And I'm like, how in the world did you get that? Well, I called this 800 number.
I went to this fly-by-night.
Well, all those guys, those 800 numbers are now shut down. And then when the IRS puts an amnesty program out there, they go, hey, if you got money and you probably shouldn't have got it, just pay us back. We'll call it even. We won't come after you. There's an issue with the program.
Yeah.
A huge issue.
But that's not what this is.
No, this is not even remotely close. This is self-employed tax credit, or SETC. And it's basically out there. You would have had to have a positive diagnosis for COVID 2021.
So let me just recap. If you were self-employed 2020 onward during the pandemic and you got COVID and you were laid up and you couldn't make money for an extended period of time,
Yes.
whether it was a week, 2 weeks, or if you had a spouse or a family member that got laid up with COVID and you had to stop working
Yes.
and take care of them and you couldn't make money, the government wants to hear from you. And to take advantage of this, to get the ball rolling, we could call you.
Yes. We'll
And you
help
can
get
walk
the
us through.
paperwork going.
Got it. 636-394-5524, CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. It's the SETC, Self-Employed Tax Credit. Give Jeff a call, and he can walk you through it and get the ball started. 636-394-5524.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Back on the show, back on the Big 550. Keep What's Yours. Jeff Zufall, Josh Gilbert, and we mentioned this at the start of the show, but it's one of the most confusing things I've ever experienced in my entire life.
It is.
And it's when you get a new job filling out that W-4. Now, before we get to how confusing that is, there is some tips. If you've got kids that are working part-time this summer, they're lifeguards, they're snack bar attendees.
Whatever. And they're making $3,000 or less, put them as exempt. Don't have any federal or state tax withheld because they don't owe it. What we see a ton is, when we're doing tax return, they're like, oh, yeah, here's my kids' W-2s. They work the summer job, and they have taxes withheld just like we do. So you got to file a return. Even though they're your dependent, we have to file a return to basically get all that tax back from the feds and the state. So it's better to say, hey, if they're making, they're working part-time for the summer, they'll go back to school, in the fall, don't have any tax withheld. It's that easy.
What is the cap though? For
About,
I don't
about $3,000. Somewhere,
$3,000.
About $3,000 is the cap.
Okay.
And what that will do is keep them from owing any tax. They basically get everything back that they pay in.
What happens, Jeff, if I've got a son who is not anything like me and realizes he starts working in the summer and got his first paycheck and he goes, ooh, I like this feeling, and then just starts gobbling up hours, picking up hours, racking in the money? What if we filed for exempt for him when we filled out that mysterious form?
Yes.
And then he
Keeps
blows
going.
past $3,000.
Then he owes tax.
Then he owes tax. So
So-
he'll keep getting paychecks
Oh, yeah.
without anything taken out.
Nobody's going to say a word. But they'll keep getting paychecks, but they won't withhold any federal or state tax. And then at the end of the year, they'll end up owing some tax.
So it is something that you want to keep in mind. Do you
Yes.
think this
This
summer
is a
job,
summer part-time job, and that's basically what if this is something where the child's going to, they're a senior in high school and they're going to keep working before they go to college and make as much money as they can make before they leave, that's a different story.
Yeah.
This is part-time, kids, how do you fill this thing out?
and work 5 hours at the library
yeah.
on Tuesdays?
Yeah, and that's it. Put them exempt, and then you don't pay any tax, and you
Do
don't
you
have
even
to worry about
do you even fill out a
Technically, you
tax
don't
return?
even have to file a tax return for them. There's no reason to, because the only time you'd really do that is if you want to get that tax back that they've paid in.
And even with these little part-time jobs and everything, does it say on there they get the last paycheck of the summer, they go back to school, that's it for them working for the rest of the year, September through December. Will it say on their last paycheck how much they've made?
Yeah, it'll give a grand total. It'll
Okay.
give a grand total of taxes withheld. But typically, these are your part-time, summer seasonal jobs that they're going to work for the summer and then go back to school.
Don't mess with
So-
the headache if you know they're going to probably
Well, if they keep working, no, don't mess with it. You'll file. So a W-4, back in the day, you used to file exemptions.
I remember there was zeros and there was
Yeah,
ones,
you
and
could-
then they say add up all the numbers.
Yeah, and you add up all the numbers, and you come up with this crazy calculation, and then
How
that's
did I
what
get
you plug in.
6?
Yeah, but then when you file your return, it's just you and your wife and kid, so you get to claim 3. Well, they did away with that a couple of years ago, and the newer W-4s, literally, you got the choice of single, married, spouse works, or head of household, and those are your choices.
Oh, really?
And then you come
Is it-
down.
Is it easier now?
It's harder because it's harder to zero it in. Then you come down and it says, hey, do you have any children or, dependents? And you plug that number in. And then where they're really getting you is they're trying to get you to withhold extra tax. So typically when we do it one time. It runs through. We see what the check looks like afterwards, and then we might critique it and just subtly adjust it a tiny bit. Maybe have extra withholdings, or then go back and adjust the W-4 to reflect maybe a higher 401k contribution or 403b contribution, stuff like that. So it typically today takes 2 times to redo it.
And this is one of those things that when you sit down with someone for the first time, they say, Jeff, I keep owing at the end of the year. What's going on?
That's where we go in and
Say,
fix
well,
it.
let's figure out,
Yeah.
and you can eyeball someone's paycheck.
Yeah.
And just say, hey, you're
Exactly.
not having enough withheld.
So, and what we typically see is most people don't realize something took place during the year where they make more money, but they have less tax withheld. And they go, well, I didn't touch a thing. No, you didn't. But what if your health insurance is pre-tax to you, but they changed carriers midstream, and the premiums went up, premiums went down, something of that effect will mess with your paycheck. We see it all the time. And somebody owes, $8,700 in the federal tax. They're like, that's impossible. It's very possible.
Yeah.
That's why you kind of got to pay attention to what's taking place on your check, especially if you make more money, but you pay in less tax, you'll end up owing.
I have a lot of full disclosure. I do a lot of work with the board ops on the weekends, and I hire some people here and there. And these kids, and sometimes not always kids, adults, they always say, hey, Josh, what do I put here on this W-4? And I always tell them, Jeff, I go, well, legally, I cannot advise you how to do that.
Yes.
And in the back of my head, I'm saying, I don't
don't know.
Ask your parents. Oh, that's what I always did.
Yeah.
But does the government, real quick question before we go, does the government want you to pay more in taxes and give you a return at
Sure
the
they
end of
do.
the year?
Yeah.
Or do they want to pay less
Nope.
and then come hound you?
The IRS wants you to pay consistently throughout the year, where you're constantly feeding the coffers in a sense. And then if you overpay, hey, they're sorry, you overpaid, but we'll pay you this back.
It's
and give you a
easier for
refund.
them to pay money back than it is to try to track it down.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's the concept. And again, it's a pay-as-you-go system, whether you really want to realize it or not. And so that means when you earn money, you should like your paycheck from a day job, they're going to withhold tax and submit it. And if you're a subcontractor or an independent contractor, when you make that money, you're supposed to make an estimated payment. So it's the same concept as you go forward.
So on the new W-4s, they want people to sign up for overpaying.
Technically, you're going to overpay is what we see, and then we got to work backwards into it. So
because again, it's easier for them to pay you back than it is to track you down.
And they look at it from a standpoint, we want more money coming in the coffers on a monthly or weekly basis. That's what pays the bills.
And again, the IRS is fair. If you
Yes.
owe them, they'll come after you. But if they owe you, they will pay you
They'll
back.
pay you back, exactly.
And finally, Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do people come into your office and say, hey, I got a new job, and I don't know how to fill this out?
Typically, I get an email. They're like, hey, I changed jobs. What do I do?
Oh, they will email you.
Oh, yeah. And then we'll say, here's a W-4. We fill it out for the first go. We send it to them, say, send us a copy of your first check, and then we'll
adjust from there.
Yeah.
All right. That is Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. Hey, Dad, how do I fill these out? Now it's, hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
How do I fill this out? 636-394-5524 or look them up online, CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. Great show today.
You betcha.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed in the preceding paid pre-recorded program are those of the host, callers, and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of this station, its management, or owners.